Imagine, for a moment, that the world around you isn't as solid and predictable as you've always believed. What if, every now and then, something happens? Something that defies logic, that shakes the very foundation of reality itself. Something that feels like the entire world has been glitched, as though the universe has a bug it can't fix. Tonight, we dive into stories of unexplainable glitches, world-shattering moments when reality itself seemed to tremble, unravel, and reveal its hidden, fragile nature. Story 1. The moment the sky glitched. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind that beckons you to slow down and take a breath, to let go of the rushing thoughts of the day and just be. I had found a perfect little corner by the window in my living room, my favorite spot where the light pours in just right, casting soft golden rays on the wooden floor. The outside world, calm and serene, seemed like a picture waiting to be admired. The trees outside were swaying gently in the breeze, their leaves fluttering softly, a quiet dance in the wind. The sky, a canvas of soft pinks and warm oranges, stretched out endlessly in front of me, as though it had been painted just for me. There was something peaceful about the world in that moment, something that made it feel like time had slowed down, and everything was in perfect harmony. I felt as though I had all the time in the world to just sit there, breathing in the beauty of the moment, letting my thoughts drift like the clouds above. The world seemed so still, so perfectly aligned with my thoughts, that I could have sworn everything around me was in sync with my very heartbeat. But then, just as I was about to close my eyes and lose myself in the warmth of the day, something happened. Something small, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. It was as though the world had shifted. The sky blinked. At first, I thought I was just tired. Maybe the long week had caught up with me, and my mind was playing tricks. I rubbed my eyes, as if doing so would fix whatever oddity I had just witnessed. But no, when I looked back up, it was still there. The horizon, once calm and steady, had flickered, like a screen losing its signal for just a fraction of a second. The colors of the sky seemed to shimmer, as though a veil had been briefly lifted, revealing something other, something that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't just the colors that changed. The clouds themselves, the soft, puffy formations that drifted lazily across the sky, seemed to twist, bend, and stretch in unnatural ways. They didn't just float anymore. They seemed to have been rerouted, as though the sky had momentarily glitched, like a computer running a program it couldn't quite process. The clouds curled in odd directions, overlapping in patterns I had never seen before, as though they were trying to escape the rules of nature itself. The wind, once gentle, seemed to hesitate, holding its breath for that brief moment. I felt a chill run down my spine as I watched this odd spectacle unfold. The world around me felt wrong, out of sync with itself. It wasn't like the usual oddities you can dismiss as mere daydreams or a trick of the light. No, this felt real, too real. There was something about it that made my heart race. I looked around the room to make sure I wasn't imagining things, but everything inside seemed as calm as ever, untouched by the strange occurrence outside. I stared back at the sky, unable to look away. The glitch didn't last long, just a heartbeat, a flicker of time, and then, as quickly as it had started, everything returned to normal. The clouds resumed their slow drift across the sky, the pink and orange hues softened again, and the world seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. It was as if nothing had happened at all, as if the universe itself had hit a reset button. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen something I wasn't supposed to. That brief moment, the way the sky seemed to bend and warp, left a strange imprint in my mind. It wasn't just a glitch in the sky. It felt like a crack in reality itself. My mind tried to rationalize it, but nothing seemed to explain it. Was it some sort of cosmic mistake, a brief slip in the fabric of the universe? Or had I, just for a second, witnessed something that I was never meant to see? I sat there, staring at the sky, my thoughts swirling around this question. It felt like the universe had shown me a glimpse behind the curtain, a brief peek at the machinery of existence, and then pulled it all back into place before I could make sense of it. The sky, once so familiar and comforting, now seemed a little more mysterious, a little more fragile. I wondered how many other times the world had glitched, and I just hadn't been awake enough to notice. The rest of the day passed in a blur, but I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. Every time I looked up at the sky, I found myself searching for signs of something unusual. Was there a crack I hadn't noticed? A faint shimmer that would betray the secrets hidden just beyond the surface of what we know? As the evening drew closer, and the colors of the sky softened into the deep blues and purples of twilight, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The world had returned to its steady rhythm, as it always does, and yet something had changed inside me. That brief glimpse of something more, something beyond the ordinary, had opened a door in my mind, a door to questions that perhaps didn't have answers. I closed my eyes, letting the soft night air drift in through the window, and thought about the glitch in the sky. I wondered if it was a sign or simply a fluke, a random anomaly that had no meaning at all. But as I let my thoughts fade and my body sank deeper into the comfort of sleep, I realized that perhaps the meaning wasn't as important as the feeling it left me with, that fleeting sense that maybe, just maybe, the world is more mysterious than we could ever imagine. And with that thought, I drifted into sleep, comforted by the knowledge that there are things in this world we may never understand, but that doesn't make them any less real. Story 2. The Vanishing Train. It was one of those late evenings where the world feels suspended in time, caught between the quiet stillness of night and the last remnants of day. The streets were empty, the city quiet, with only the dim glow of the streetlights casting long shadows along the pavement. I had just finished a long day, my mind weary, and all I wanted was to head home and sink into the comfort of my bed. The train station, usually bustling with commuters, was practically deserted. The only sounds that filled the air were the soft hum of distant cars and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. I made my way to the platform, the clacking of my shoes against the concrete echoing in the stillness. The air felt cool, almost crisp, as I pulled my coat tighter around me. I glanced at the schedule board, my eyes scanning for the time of the next train. It would be a few minutes, just enough time to gather my thoughts and let the tiredness settle in. I stood by the edge of the platform, watching the train tracks stretch off into the distance, the glow of the lights catching on the steel rails. But then, something strange happened. At first, it was so subtle, I thought I had imagined it. I looked up just as the familiar low hum of an approaching train reached my ears. I had become accustomed to the rhythm of the trains, their sounds marking the passage of time, but this one felt different. The train seemed to appear far too quickly. The sound was there before I could even spot the lights in the distance, and before I knew it, the train was practically upon me. It was as though it had materialized out of nowhere, appearing with no warning, its headlights glaring brightly against the dimness of the platform. I stepped back slightly, instinctively, my heart rate picking up just a little. I wasn't sure if I was startled by how fast the train had appeared or by the strange, unnatural way it had come to a stop in front of me. The sound of the train's brakes screeching to a halt echoed through the station, but something felt off. The doors didn't open as they should have. The usual sound of the train's doors sliding open with a mechanical hum didn't come. There was a silence, a moment of stillness that felt out of place in a world that was always moving. I blinked, trying to adjust my mind to what I was seeing. The train, standing perfectly still before me, shimmered, as if the edges of its metal frame were flickering, like a broken TV screen or a mirage in the desert. The headlights seemed to pulse, fading and returning with an almost rhythmic intensity. And then, as if it had never been there at all, the train began to fade. It wasn't like the usual disappearing act, like a car driving away or a plane taking off. It was as if the very air around it had folded in on itself. The train shimmered one last time, like a glitch in the fabric of reality. And then, just like that, it vanished. The platform, once filled with the promise of the next train, was now completely empty. I stood there, frozen for a moment, my mind trying to catch up with what had just happened. Was I dreaming? Had I fallen asleep standing up? I rubbed my eyes, certain that I must be exhausted, that I had simply imagined the whole thing. But no, the empty platform remained, the faint echo of the trains passing still lingering in the air. The lights above flickered once, but that was it. There was nothing. Just the emptiness of the station stretching on forever, as though time itself had decided to take a pause. I turned around, hoping to find someone who might have seen it too, someone who could tell me I wasn't crazy. And then I noticed them. There were a few others scattered along the platform, standing as still as I was. They were all looking at the spot where the train had been, their faces painted with confusion, disbelief. A few were even looking down at their phones, perhaps hoping to find an explanation. But no one was moving. No one was speaking. The moment was suspended in time, as though we were all waiting for some kind of explanation that we knew deep down would never come. One woman, standing near the end of the platform, slowly turned to me, her face pale. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice shaky. Was that real?" Her words felt like the only sound in the entire station, and for a second, it felt like the world had stopped moving. I nodded, unsure of what to say. I had seen it too, and it was as real as anything I had ever experienced. But what was it? Others began to speak up, all of them echoing the same confusion. One man, shaking his head, muttered something about a glitch in the system. He seemed certain that it had just been some kind of technical error. But even as he said it, his voice trembled, and I could see the doubt in his eyes. A technical glitch? Maybe, but it didn't feel like it. It didn't feel like anything I had ever experienced before. Deep down, I knew it wasn't just some glitch. It wasn't the train system malfunctioning, and it wasn't some strange trick of my mind. No, This felt like something bigger, something beyond explanation. The way the train had appeared out of nowhere, the way it had shimmered and vanished in front of us. It was as if reality itself had bent just for a moment, as if the very fabric of time and space had been stretched and warped, and then snapped back into place. I took a few steps forward, still staring at the spot where the train had been. The tracks lay bare, no sign of the mysterious train that had passed through moments ago. It was as if it had never been there at all, as though it had been erased from time. But I knew it had happened. We all did. And yet no one could explain it. The woman beside me sighed, her face pale with a mixture of fear and awe. "What just happened?" she whispered, almost to herself. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that I had just witnessed something that defied all logic, something that I could not wrap my mind around. And as I stood there, lost in the stillness of the platform, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just been revealed to me, a secret, a glimpse into a world that lay just beneath the surface of our reality. A world where the rules didn't quite apply, where time and space could bend and break in ways we couldn't understand. And then, just as quickly as it had all started, the moment was over. The next train arrived, just as expected, its lights bright and its doors opening with the usual hum. The platform began to fill with commuters once again, oblivious to the strange anomaly that had just unfolded in front of them. I climbed aboard the train, the noise of the station fading behind me, but the memory of that vanishing train lingered in my mind, a reminder that there are moments in life that exist just outside the reach of explanation, moments when the world glitches, and we are left to wonder whether we've witnessed something extraordinary, or if, perhaps, we are simply too small to understand the mysteries of the universe. Story 3. The Fractured Reflection. It was a quiet evening, the kind where the world outside seems to settle into a gentle stillness, and the sounds of the day fade into the background. The only noise was the soft hum of the house settling into the night. I had been busy throughout the day, and now, as the night stretched out ahead, I felt the weight of exhaustion settling into my bones. The warmth of the house wrapped around me like a blanket, and it was the perfect moment to wind down before bed. I made my way to the bathroom, ready to prepare for a peaceful night's sleep. The mirror was fogged up from the steam of my shower, so I wiped a small patch clean with my hand. As I stood there, brushing my teeth in front of the mirror, I couldn't help but notice how quiet everything seemed. There was no sound but the soft brushing of the toothbrush against my teeth and the rhythmic drip of water from the faucet. The world outside seemed so far away, and for a brief moment, everything felt peaceful. But as I wiped the foam from my lips and lifted my head to look at my reflection, something was wrong. At first, it was so subtle I thought I must be imagining it. It was just a flicker, a tiny shift in my reflection. But then it happened again. My reflection blinked, but it didn't blink at the same time as I did. It was just a fraction of a second later, but it was enough to make me stop mid-motion, toothbrush still hanging from my mouth. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the mirror. For a split second, the reflection wasn't even my face looking back at me. The eyes, my eyes, looked different. There was something in them, something cold, something darker. My own reflection seemed off, distant, like a shadow that wasn't entirely mine. The eyes were hollow, almost empty, and as I stood there, staring into them, I felt a shiver creep up my spine. I shook my head, telling myself it was just fatigue, that I was seeing things after a long day. But even as I tried to rationalize it, my reflection seemed to move slightly, as though it had its own will, independent of my actions. I felt an odd unease creeping up on me, as if my reflection was trying to escape, to pull away from me. It didn't feel like it was me looking back from the mirror. The longer I stared, the more I felt the space between myself and the image in the glass growing wider. I reached up, my hand trembling slightly, to wipe my face, thinking maybe I was just too tired to see straight. But as soon as my fingers touched the mirror, something changed. The reflection fractured. It wasn't like a regular crack, not like the glass shattering when you strike it with force. No, this was different. The image itself seemed to split apart, like the very fabric of the world was tearing, each shard of my reflection splintering in a way that was almost unnatural. It wasn't glass that had shattered, but something deeper, something I couldn't name, a crack in the very core of reality. My own reflection twisted, stretching and warping as if the mirror was struggling to hold it together. My breath caught in my throat. The mirror shimmered, and for a brief second, I felt as though I wasn't just staring at myself. I was looking into something else entirely. Something darker. Something that shouldn't have been there. That shouldn't have been able to move or exist in this world. The moment felt like it lasted an eternity, even though it was only a fraction of a second. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. I took a step back, heart pounding in my chest, and in that moment, everything went quiet. The world outside, the house, the steady hum of the night, all of it seemed to pause. It was as if time itself had stopped, leaving only me and the fractured reflection in the mirror. I quickly turned away, my breath quickening, my body trembling as I stepped back into the bathroom, away from the glass. But even as I backed away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The feeling of something other lingering just behind the veil of my reflection. I stood there, unable to move, trying to force myself to calm down, telling myself it was just a trick of the light, or perhaps a fleeting illusion brought on by exhaustion. But then, I finally dared to glance back at the mirror. It was normal again. My reflection was me. It was exactly as I had always seen it, the familiar face staring back at me, my eyes steady and calm. The eerie, fractured image was gone, vanished as if it had never been. My reflection was whole again, the way it always had been. I let out a slow breath, almost relieved. But deep down, a lingering doubt gnawed at me, a sense that something had been revealed, something I was never supposed to see. I reached up to touch my face, half expecting the reflection to move differently, to break apart once more. But nothing happened. Still, the feeling remained, a subtle, insistent presence at the back of my mind. As I finished brushing my teeth and prepared for bed, I couldn't shake the image of my reflection, that reflection that had seemed to slip away from me, twisting in ways it shouldn't have been able to. I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the mind, that it had all been a product of the day's fatigue. But deep down, I couldn't quite convince myself. Something had happened in that moment, something that I couldn't explain, something that felt like a crack, a rupture in the very fabric of reality, and I had seen it. I had glimpsed something else, something that wasn't quite me. And though the mirror was still, though everything appeared normal again, I couldn't forget what I had felt in that instant, what I had seen. As I lay in bed that night, the darkness around me seemed heavier, as if the world was holding its breath. I closed my eyes, trying to push the thoughts away, but they lingered in the back of my mind, like a whisper I couldn't ignore. The feeling that the world, and the mirror that reflected it, held secrets, dark secrets, that we are not meant to understand. And as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but wonder, had I just witnessed a glimpse of something that wasn't meant for human eyes? Or was it simply a crack in my perception, a fleeting moment of disconnection between myself and the world around me? Either way, the question remained unanswered in the silence of the night. Story 4. The Flickering City. Have you ever walked through a city, moving among its streets, and for a brief moment, it felt like the world was repeating itself, as if time had taken a strange, uninvited pause? I was in the heart of downtown, the place I knew so well. The towering buildings rose high around me, their glass windows reflecting the fading light of the evening. The city felt alive, vibrant, and buzzing with its usual rhythm. People milled about, rushing here and there, their faces lit by the neon glow of billboards flashing their advertisements. The air was filled with the usual mix of sounds, distant car horns, chatter, the hum of conversations blending with the thrum of the city itself. But something felt off, just the faintest change in the air, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. At first, it was easy to dismiss. After all, the city was always alive, always moving, and I had spent so many hours walking these streets. Yet today, the rhythm of the city seemed wrong. I couldn't quite place it. It wasn't that anything was overtly strange, but there were these subtle little glitches that lingered, unnoticed by the people around me, as though something was just not right. I walked down the sidewalk, passing familiar stores and shops, the ones I always walked by without thinking twice. A sleek black car zoomed past me, its headlights flashing as it sped down the street. But then something stopped me. I hadn't heard it. Not the usual hum of an engine, not the sound of tires against pavement. It was as if the car had appeared out of thin air, its movement almost too smooth, too perfect. I turned around to see if I had somehow missed it, but the street was quiet. The car was gone, swallowed by the city's pulse. A chill ran through me, though I tried to ignore it. Maybe it was the exhaustion from a long day, the tiredness in my legs, or the late hour making me see things. I told myself to push through it, to just keep walking, to trust the city was as it always was. But then it happened again. A pedestrian, a man in a dark coat, was walking ahead of me, his steps steady. He seemed familiar, though I couldn't place him. I watched as he moved toward a crosswalk, his steps light and easy. And then, just as I blinked, he was standing in the same spot again. The same man, wearing the same dark coat, walking in the same direction. His steps weren't even out of sync. They were perfectly the same, as if time had rewound itself, and we were right back at the beginning. My heart skipped a beat. It was as though the moment had looped, retracted itself into the same moment, playing out exactly as it had before. I looked around, my gaze darting from one person to another, trying to find some explanation. But everyone was going about their business, oblivious to what I had just seen. The man didn't even seem to notice. He just kept walking, as though nothing had changed. I took a few steps forward, my footsteps suddenly sounding far too loud in the quiet night. I reached the same spot where he had been, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But when I looked around, it was as if nothing had shifted. The city was flickering. The buildings, the ones I had walked past hundreds of times before, seemed to shimmer just slightly, like static on a television screen. The streetlights, which had always illuminated the sidewalk in a steady glow, now flickered in and out, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. The ground beneath my feet felt slightly unstable, as if the pavement was shifting ever so slightly, stretching and pulling in a way that felt unnatural. I stopped walking, trying to steady myself. The air, usually crisp with the promise of the night, now felt thick, heavier than usual, as though the world around me was folding and unfolding, caught in a quiet moment of collapse. I tried to focus, to ignore the unease creeping up on me. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe the weight of the day had finally caught up with me. I had been running from one thing to another all day long, and perhaps it was the mental strain playing tricks on my senses. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath, willing myself to let go of the unsettling feeling. When I opened them again, I saw the street ahead, just like it had always been. People were chatting, walking past me without a second glance, the lights of the billboards flashing with their usual brightness. But then, it happened again. A distant sound, a car horn, a soft blare, echoed in the distance. But the sound didn't match the car I saw driving past. The vehicle seemed to move too smoothly, its wheels not even brushing against the road, as if it were gliding rather than driving. I turned my head to watch it disappear down the street, but as quickly as it came, it vanished, like it had never been there at all. The car, the sound, the movement, none of it made sense. The city was shifting, like a film reel skipping frames, like time itself was stuttering and rebooting. I could feel it in the air, in the way the world around me seemed to lose its solidity, the way the lights seemed to blink in and out of existence. The buildings ahead shimmered for a moment, like they were fading into nothing, only to return as they had been. It was subtle, so quiet that no one else seemed to notice, but I could feel it. I stood still for a moment in the middle of the street, watching the world around me, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't really a part of it. It was as if I were standing in the eye of a storm that no one else could feel. The city, the people, the sounds, they were all running on a loop, a cycle that no one else seemed to be aware of. Time had splintered, and no one noticed the cracks. With every step I took, the glitches continued. A man walked past me, his face so familiar that I was certain I had seen him before, but he didn't notice me. He kept walking, his expression blank, as if we were repeating the same moment over and over. I watched the billboards blink, their colors flashing in rhythmic patterns that seemed to mirror the beat of my heart. The noise, the voices, the hum of the world, it all felt suspended, trapped in a loop, and I was the only one awake to it. I looked around, feeling a strange sense of disconnection. I wasn't in the city anymore, not in the way I had been before. It was as though I had stepped into some alternate version of the world, a world where the rules of time and space had somehow been bent, and I was the only one who had noticed. The glitches were small, but in that moment, they were everything. They were all that I could see, all that I could feel. I tried to shake it off, to walk faster, to get to where I needed to go. But the city, the world, seemed to be holding its breath. And deep down, I knew that no matter how fast I moved, I couldn't outrun the glitches, the loops, the soft resets. As I turned the corner and made my way home, I felt the city around me, still flickering, still warping, still caught in its quiet storm. And I couldn't help but wonder, how many times had it happened before? How many more times would it happen again? And would anyone else ever notice? Story 5. The Broken Conversation. It was one of those perfect afternoons where time seemed to slow down. The kind where the world outside melts away, and all that matters is the conversation, the warmth of your favorite drink, and the comfort of a close friend. I was sitting in a cozy cafe, nestled in a corner by the window, watching the rain gently fall outside. The soft patter against the window pane blended with the quiet hum of background music, creating a soothing atmosphere. My friend and I had been talking for hours, as we often did, about everything and nothing, life, dreams, memories, and the small moments that fill up the space between big events. There's something comforting about those kinds of conversations, the ones that flow so easily, where words come without effort, and there's no need to rush. You don't have to worry about silences or awkward pauses, because every moment feels just right. My friend's laughter filled the air, and I smiled, content in the simplicity of the moment. We'd been chatting about a funny incident from a few weeks ago, reminiscing about our shared experiences and old jokes that always managed to bring a smile. But then, something happened. Something I can't explain. It was subtle at first, so small, I almost missed it, but when I looked up, it was like a switch had been flipped. My friend's face had frozen in mid-expression. Her lips were parted, as if she had been speaking, but the words hung in the air, unfinished. The look on her face was strange. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, her body frozen in place. It wasn't just that she had stopped talking, she had stopped moving, as if time had paused just for her. I blinked, thinking it was some sort of joke, but she didn't move. Her hand, which had been gesturing toward me, was caught in midair, suspended in time. The rest of the cafe seemed to carry on around us. People walked by, the sound of cups clinking on tables, the soft murmur of conversation, all of it was still happening. But not for her. She was completely still, her expression locked in a strange half-smile, like a photo taken at the exact wrong moment. I waited, unsure of what to do. I thought it was a prank, that maybe she was waiting for me to react, but the silence stretched on longer than I expected. I started to feel a creeping sense of unease. What was going on? Was she okay? Then, just as suddenly as the stillness had taken over, my friend blinked. The world resumed its natural rhythm. Her eyes moved, and she started speaking again, as though no time had passed at all. But the words that came out of her mouth were completely different. She didn't pick up where we had left off. She didn't acknowledge the conversation we had been having moments before. She spoke as though she had skipped over an entire conversation, like the moments that had just unfolded didn't exist at all. "Did you hear about that new place downtown?" she asked, her voice light and casual. as though she hadn't just been frozen in time. I stared at her, my mind racing. I had no idea what had just happened. My heart started to race as I tried to process the shift. It wasn't like she had just forgotten where we left off. No, it was more than that. It was as if the conversation had been interrupted in a way I couldn't understand, like time itself had been gently nudged off track. I opened my mouth to respond, but I couldn't seem to find the words. I felt like I was in the middle of some strange dream, a place where reality was uncertain and nothing made sense. After a moment, I gathered myself enough to ask, my voice trembling slightly, "What happened just now?" "You were talking about something else. You just stop." She blinked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What are you talking about?" she replied, looking genuinely perplexed. "I haven't said anything like that. I was just telling you about the new restaurant." "What's going on?" My pulse quickened. This wasn't right. I could feel the unease crawling under my skin. Something had happened. Something strange. Something I couldn't explain. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had just zoned out for a moment. Maybe she had paused to think and I had missed it. But no, that didn't feel like what had happened. I had watched her freeze, and then I had watched her start speaking again, as though nothing had occurred. She looked at me, waiting for my response, but I just sat there in silence, my mind spinning, trying to understand what had just taken place. What was going on? How could we have been talking, and then, just like that, everything changed? It felt like the conversation had been broken, fractured somehow, like a glitch in the world. She started talking again, her voice continuing as if nothing was wrong, but I couldn't concentrate. I was too focused on what had just happened, too unsettled by the feeling that we had slipped into some alternate reality. A reality where time had slipped, where moments had been erased, and we were left picking up the pieces. The more I thought about it, the more strange it became. Was it a glitch? Was it some sort of trick of the mind? Or had something real happened? Something beyond explanation, beyond comprehension? Was this just a fleeting moment where the universe had interrupted itself, where time had fractured, and neither of us was aware of it? The conversation carried on, but the unease in the pit of my stomach never fully left. I looked at my friend, smiling and laughing as she spoke, but deep down, I felt a quiet disconnection, a nagging sense that something was missing. We kept talking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the thread of our conversation had been torn, pulled apart, and no one could understand why. As the evening wore on, I tried to push the thoughts from my mind, but I couldn't forget what had happened. What had we experienced? Was it real, or had we both stepped outside of time, even if only for a moment? As I left the cafe that evening, the world around me seemed to hum with an almost surreal quality. The streets were bustling, the lights were bright, and the familiar sounds of the city swirled around me. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop wondering, had I just witnessed a rift in the fabric of time? Or was it all just a strange trick of the mind? Story 6. The Vanishing Hour. It was just another ordinary evening, the kind that fades into the quiet rhythm of the day's end. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a pale glow on the horizon. I had been running errands all day, bouncing between appointments, picking up a few things at the store, and checking off my to-do list with the usual efficiency. By the time I finally finished, I was more than ready to head home. The business of the day had kept me on my toes, and all I wanted was to slip into the calm comfort of my apartment. I stepped off the bus and made my way down the street toward the building where I lived, the sound of my footsteps echoing softly in the still evening air. The streets were quieter now, with only a few people wandering here and there, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights. The building itself seemed the same as it always did, tall and imposing, standing at the end of the block, the windows reflecting the dim light from the streets below. When I entered the lobby, I felt a sense of relief, familiar, comforting. The elevator was right in front of me, its polished doors gleaming under the lights. I pushed the button to call it, checked my phone for the time, and saw that it was 6:45 p.m. A glance at my watch confirmed it too. Just another hour before I could finally kick off my shoes and relax. The elevator doors opened with their usual soft chime, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for my floor. The elevator hummed to life, its gentle vibrations making everything feel smooth and effortless. I leaned back against the wall, glancing down at my phone again. As the elevator began its slow ascent, I couldn't help but notice how peaceful it was. The usual sounds of the building, the occasional creak of the elevator cables, and the faint buzz of lights overhead. Everything felt normal. Everything felt routine. The elevator ride felt like it always did. The building seemed perfectly still, as though time itself had paused for a moment. I could hear the soft sound of my own breathing, the only noise besides the hum of the elevator. As I rode upward, I thought about the day, how much I had accomplished, how many little things I had checked off my list. It had been a long day, and I was looking forward to a quiet evening alone. When the elevator stopped and the doors slid open with that familiar sound, I stepped out into the hallway, ready to make my way to my apartment. I pulled out my phone again to check the time, but something felt off. It wasn't anything loud or jarring, but I could feel it, the sensation that something had shifted. I glanced at my phone screen. It still read 6:45 p.m. I blinked, certain that I had just checked the time not a moment ago. Hadn't I been on the elevator for a few minutes at least? I thought about it, but the more I tried to focus on the timeline of my actions, the more I felt disoriented. It didn't make sense. I looked at the time again, but there it was, 6:45, just as it had been when I stepped into the elevator. Was my phone malfunctioning? I quickly checked the time on my watch. Same thing. It read 6:45 as well. My heartbeat picked up just slightly. I paused in the hallway, feeling an odd unease wash over me. The elevator had taken a couple of minutes to reach my floor. I was sure of it. But how could the time have stayed the same? A whole few minutes had passed, and yet nothing had changed on the clock. The hallway was still quiet, and the lights above flickered slightly, casting soft shadows on the walls. I stepped into my apartment, pushing the door shut behind me, but my mind was still stuck on the strange moment in the elevator. I shrugged it off at first, convincing myself that it was just exhaustion. Maybe I had misremembered the time or simply hadn't noticed the minute hand move. Maybe it was just one of those small, bizarre moments when your mind doesn't quite connect the dots. I tried to focus on something else, but the strange feeling lingered in the back of my mind. I dropped my bag on the kitchen counter and set my phone down on the table. As I moved around, getting comfortable for the evening, I tried to push the thought away, but it kept creeping in. I kept glancing at the time, expecting it to move forward, but it never did. It wasn't until the next evening, as I was heading out for another round of errands, that the feeling returned. The same thing happened. I got in the elevator, checked the time on my phone, 6:45 p.m. The doors closed behind me, and I rode up feeling the familiar calm wash over me. But when the doors opened, I glanced at my phone again. 6:45 p.m. My heart skipped a beat. My watch read the same time. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Had I missed something? Had I stepped into some kind of time loop? How was it possible? The building felt the same. The elevator hummed in the same rhythm. I couldn't explain it. I wasn't sure whether to laugh it off or to feel a deep, creeping sense of unease. I was sure the night before, when I stepped into my apartment, I had experienced more than just a few seconds. And yet, here I was again, standing at the same point in time. It was as though an entire hour had simply vanished from existence, gone, erased, and no one else seemed to notice. As the days passed, I began to wonder if I was losing track of time. I couldn't explain it, but each time the situation repeated, I couldn't shake the feeling that time itself had somehow been disturbed. Had I experienced a glitch? Or had I somehow stepped outside the flow of time, if only for a moment? It was in these moments of wondering that I realized the true strangeness of it all. The feeling that time had slipped through my fingers, unnoticed, just like sand in the wind. And as I lay in bed at night, watching the hours tick by on the clock beside me, I couldn't help but wonder, how often do these moments happen without us even knowing? What if the whole world was filled with small rifts in time, little glitches that go unnoticed by everyone except those who pay close enough attention? Maybe we're all just caught in these hidden pockets of time, unaware of the delicate balance that holds it all together. And so, night after night, I lie awake, waiting for the moment when the clock will glitch again, when I'll feel time bend and twist in the quiet hum of the world around me. And in those quiet moments, I find myself wondering, if an hour can vanish without a trace, what else might slip through the cracks of reality, unnoticed by all but a few? Story 7. The Infinite Reflection. It was one of those quiet nights when the world outside seemed to fall into a peaceful silence, the kind where everything feels still and at ease. I had decided to stay up late to finish a bit of work at my desk, the soft glow of the desk lamp the only light in the room. The rest of the house was calm, no sounds except the occasional creak of the floorboards or the distant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I was focused, the hours slipping by as I worked quietly, my thoughts settling into the rhythm of the task at hand. After a while, I stood up to stretch, feeling the ache of sitting too long in one place. The quiet of the house seemed to wrap around me as I moved through the hall. I walked past the hallway mirror, a large, ornate thing that had been hanging on the wall for years. It had always seemed just a part of the background, a simple reflection of my everyday life, nothing out of the ordinary. But that night, something was different. As I passed the mirror, I paused, caught by something subtle yet unmistakable. My reflection didn't match my movements. I had taken a step to the side, and for a split second, my reflection remained frozen. It wasn't just a delay. It was as though the reflection was waiting, as if it hadn't yet caught up with me. My own body moved, but the reflection stayed still, almost as if it was reluctant to follow. I blinked, my heart suddenly beating a little faster. I stood there, still as I tried to make sense of it. Was I just imagining things? I took another step, slower this time, and my reflection followed, eventually. It wasn't fluid like it should have been. The image in the mirror seemed to stutter, as if struggling to keep up with my movements. My reflection shifted a moment later, hesitating before matching me. But then came the strange part, the part that I couldn't quite explain. When I stopped, the reflection didn't. It kept moving. It was subtle at first, just a slight lag. My reflection continued to walk, even though I had stopped in my tracks. I watched in disbelief as my mirrored image took one more step, then another, as if it were trying to break free from the glass. I could feel my pulse quickening as I stood there, staring at my own reflection walking away, further and further from me, the space between us widening, though I hadn't moved an inch. For a brief moment, I wondered if my eyes were playing tricks on me. I stepped forward, hoping that the action would snap the reflection back into alignment with my own movements. But instead of correcting itself, the reflection began to stretch. It wasn't just walking. It seemed to elongate, its form becoming thinner, more distorted. The lines of my reflection blurred as it moved in a way that I couldn't control. It became wrong. It was as though it was caught in an endless loop, a repetitive cycle of movement like a recording on repeat, stretching further with each movement. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat, a chill running through my spine. I could hardly look away, even as I felt an overwhelming sense of unease building inside me. The reflection seemed to pull and twist, elongating like a shadow fighting to escape its boundaries. The more I watched, the stranger it became. The distortion in the mirror wasn't just visual anymore. It felt like something deeper, something that was shifting the very fabric of reality. My reflection wasn't just a simple image, it was alive, trying to break free. And I felt as though the world was slipping out of focus, just slightly, just enough for me to notice. For a moment, I thought the mirror might crack. It was as if the glass couldn't hold the weight of whatever strange force had taken over it. The pressure was too much, the reflection warping with such intensity that I half expected it to shatter, to tear open and reveal something beyond the surface. But then, just as suddenly as it had all begun, the movement stopped. The reflection snapped back into place, as though it had never moved at all. The image in the mirror was once again the familiar me, standing still and steady. My heart was racing, my breath shallow, but the mirror itself was calm, undisturbed. Everything was as it should be, or so it seemed. I stood there for a long moment, staring at my reflection. It was as though nothing had happened. My reflection looked the same as it always did, the same eyes, the same face, the same posture. But deep down, I knew something had changed. Something had slipped through the cracks of reality, just for a moment. The mirror no longer felt like a simple reflection. It felt like a portal to something else, something other. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had glimpsed something beyond the glass, a shadow of myself, stretching in ways that shouldn't have been possible. I backed away slowly, my eyes still on the mirror. A part of me wanted to turn away, to pretend it hadn't happened, to tell myself that it was just a trick of the mind, some strange effect of late-night exhaustion. But another part of me couldn't ignore the feeling, the strange unease that clung to me. I'd felt it before, like a slight shift in the world, a crack in the fabric of what I knew to be true. I walked away from the hallway, but the image of that infinite reflection stayed with me, lingering in the corners of my mind. As I went back to my desk, I couldn't help but wonder, what if I had just seen a glimpse of something beyond this world? A space where mirrors weren't just reflections, but gateways. A place where the boundary between what was real and what was possible wasn't as solid as I had always thought. I tried to focus on my work again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror hadn't just reflected me. It had reflected something else, something that was waiting to break free. And as I tried to settle into the quiet of the night, I realized that I wasn't just afraid of the reflection. I was afraid of what it might mean, of what it might have revealed, even if just for a moment.